Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And in this case, we're talking about cybersecurity, insurance, and so much more. We're honored to be joined by Dudley Ray, managing partner with Higginbotham, the Houston region. We also have Stacey Horne, Stillwater Ecosystem founder and servant leader. How are you two guys doing?
Doing great.
Excellent, Jeremy.
Well, let's start out, Dudley. Let's start with a little bit of background about Higginbotham. And so give us your world with Higginbotham.
So my world with Higginbotham, I run the property and casualty operations in Houston. We merged, Swanton and Gordon merged with Higginbotham in 2010, and we've grown substantially. We now have over 150 employees, and we offer property casualty benefits, 401k, life insurance, pretty much anything insurance.
Talk about cybersecurity and how that plays an integral role on the insurance side.
At this time, cyber is the biggest topic that everyone wants to talk about. No one wants to do anything about it, but they all want to talk about it until they get hacked. And fortunately, we were introduced to Stacey and his company, Stillwater, about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and he has helped us solve some really critical issues for our clients.
And we'll talk about some stories here in a second, but Stacey, let's switch over. Give us some context around Stillwater Ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So the Stillwater Ecosystem is 40-plus companies. They're all vetted culturally, professionally, personally. And we really focus on proactive cyber measures. Let's stop the bad guys. Building resilience, bend don't break, recovery not resurrection. And really our goal is in concert with an enhanced set of options for cyber risk transfer insurance. I think that's, in a nutshell, kind of the context.
When you talk about an ecosystem, obviously a lot of collaborative partners that each have their expertise. Talk about Higginbotham and how that plays a role in the ecosystem.
Yes, indeed. So fortunately, we have some of the top in class in the ecosystem, and they span the range of size and complexity. They work very closely on proactive services, risk transfer, compliance, risk assessments, things of that nature, all the way through to incident response, which, you know, it's not what you want to hear, but we have some capabilities to address that.
When you're talking, Dudley, on the front end and you're looking at an assessment, the gaps, the needs, what are the things that you're starting to look at that you start thinking, hey, these are some good fits for Stillwater Ecosystem? So when you're on the front end and already looking at where these gaps are and how you can start helping, especially with day two services, talk about kind of that process.
Unfortunately, we generally get involved after it's too late. But recently it's been helpful because Stillwater has given us some real life adventures, if you will, that we take to our clients and say, hey, this is what's happening. You need to get ready for it. And their group, Stillwater's group, has done a great job of doing what we call a quick glance. And it's just a sneak peek at their website from how the bad guys look at it. And we can show them that report and say, hey, you got some weaknesses here. Get with your IT folks and we need to clean this up. Usually we have to clean it up before we can even get a quote. It's getting that serious.
Talk about how Stillwater, the ecosystem, gives Higginbotham an advantage. And just like you're talking about, you know, what differentiator, what does it mean on your end?
Well, we have the benefit of some extremely well-vetted firms that are good at what they do. Instead of us or our client having to research, we have Stillwater that does the research for us. So if we have someone that's hacked, we know, and depending on how they were hacked, then Stillwater will say, this is the expert you need. If it's social engineering and they're just not doing a very good job of policing their website, he has another firm to do that. So it complements what our clients need.
You always have an expert to turn to.
That's right.
So carry that into an illustration. Stacey, on your end, give us an example of how this plays out.
So it plays out in a proactive way with the cyber application 90 days beforehand. And to Dudley's point, the quick glance will identify some gaps is an opportunity to address those and revisit the application. And I'm certainly not the insurance expert, but I do notice that some of these exclusions and sublimits become removed when there's a better best practice demonstrated there. So I think that's a real world example of how that works.
Give us an idea when you talk about stepping in sometimes, on the back end. Yeah. Give us an idea of what that looks like in terms of being able to really be a trusted help and resource for the client.
Yes, it really starts with this too shall pass and kind of walking them back from, the disaster feel. And then it really becomes a process of let's identify how, to Dudley's point earlier, bring the right folks in, let's address this. And one of the keys is you don't want this to happen again. So we're not just going to put you back to the state you were in. Let's make sure you're better protected, more proactive measures in place, and let's make sure it's a bend, don't break in the unlikely event it might happen again.
Dudley, what has your attention when you look at the growing field and the nuances, the complexities, the evolution? So when you talk about cybersecurity, cyber risk management, what has your attention, especially with regards to the clients and the trends looking forward? What has your attention?
What has our attention is, unfortunately, that no system is unhackable. And all of almost any industry, including construction, whatever you want to call it, they're driven by cyber. And it is what it is. So we are just trying to be as proactive as we can. Number one, we're being forced to because the insurance carriers won't give us a quote unless we do certain things. But we're trying to educate our clients that if you go above and beyond, your premiums are going to go down. But number two, you're less likely to get hacked because they're looking for the defenseless first.
Give us some tips, Stacey, when you talk about being proactive, setting yourself up to get the best, coverage at the best rate, and all of those nuances that go in that side. Give us a couple of good tips.
Sure. So it's all about discovery. We don't know what we don't know. So identifying, bringing awareness, and then we close those gaps. We offer the advice to do that. The other thing is, let's look at policies and procedures. And if you only have one, let it be an incident response plan, because that's not the point in time where you're going to be thinking rational when the worst case happens. So have that in place, test it, and then if you have any changes on the team members that are associated with it, update it, test it again.
Can I add something here?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we have to get established first with our clients is that we're not trying to replace their IT department. There are many clients that get a little defensive on that. We're strictly here to help their IT department.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit deeper about the incident response plan. What are one or two things in there that you wish every company had in there? So what are for those who are like, what is that?
Right.
What needs to be in there?
So you need the right people that can address things like public relations, legal, IT, obviously. Also communications with third parties and vendors and your clients themselves. And the other thing about it is you really do want to do a live test. You want to action it. You don't want to necessarily say, we're planning it for 3 weeks from Tuesday. You put it in action and see how well it works. You learn from that. So I would say those are the basic tenets of a good, healthy incident response plan.
And reputational. You didn't mention it by word, but their reputation is everything. So we really try to help them with that, recovering that.
Touch on some of the things that these policies allow for. In other words, if something happens, things like the response, the reputation management. So in other words, what all goes into that sort of policy?
It can be very broad and it can be very limited, and that is the biggest dilemma I guess we have as insurance professionals, is trying to explain that yes, there's a policy over here that is basics and then all the way to the Cadillac. So we try to educate that client to where they're more comfortable with what their risk is. What we're finding right now is social engineering is a huge issue, but the carriers will only give you certain limits. They'll only give you sublimits. That is a problem that needs to be addressed internally. We need to stop it from happening. The ransomware, you have all of the notifications. Stacey knows more about that, but they're going to help with the Cadillac. Basically takes care of all of those issues.
As homeowners, we're used to the personal insurance, and then you get into property and casualty, employee benefits. These are all terms that most business owners and individuals, commonplace. When you talk about cyber risk management, cyber liability, it's becoming a buzzword, and obviously, as you mentioned, very complex, and it can be a lot of different things in terms of how deep it goes. But give us, when you look at kind of the trends on that side, what are one or two things that you wish everyone knew specifically about the growing prevalence, the importance of it for having it with your business? What are one or two things you wish everyone knew when it comes to cyber risk management, cyber liability insurance?
I think the most important concept is that it's going to shut your business down. So, unless you've got a lot of money in the bank, you're going to be hurting. But most people don't think it's going to happen to them. They've heard about it, but they haven't seen it. So we really don't get their full attention until they get hit. And then we're in crisis mode. Yeah. But that's when Stillwater comes in.
Yeah, there you go. The heroes come in to save the day.
Well, we would very much like to be on the front end, hardening the target so that doesn't happen. And that's part of our collective goal. When you think about it, I have a simple math equation. Risk mitigation plus risk transfer products, both and greater than either or. They each help facilitate the other. You have enhanced options. You have less likelihood you need it. That's a good way to think about a best practice when it comes to cyber risk.
I'll throw this out for either one of you, but give us a story of Higginbotham Stillwater Ecosystem working together on these sort of shared opportunities.
The first time I met Stacey, I had a large home builder client, and they were getting non-renewed on the cyber. And I brought Stacey in. We did a quick glance, and because of Stacey's work, in a week, we not only got the non-renewal out, we actually saved them money from the prior year because he was able to go in and give them advice that they fixed quickly.
When you look at that as an opportunity on your end, I mean, obviously that's got to warm your heart because, you can take something that's a very, challenging situation for a business and turn it into positive.
Yes.
And so when you look at those sort of opportunities, talk about what that means for you and your team to turn a negative into a positive.
Well, that's what we aspire to do. We really genuinely, yes, it's a commercial component to business, but also we really do want to protect people. We really do believe that risk transfer and risk mitigation for businesses, there's a warming of the heart effect. That's not, you can't tangibly put that anywhere, but that's true. And the other thing I would say is I think we've seen positives turn into greater positives. In other words, an example like Dudley gave, where it's like, hey, we fixed some things, this got better. Oh, we need to be more aware. That kind of thing. And so it feeds on itself. Culture, cybersecurity is about culture in an organization. If folks go, you kind of got a posture. If they proactively buy in, some companies actually will do kind of a competition thing. And for the positive responders and the ones who don't click on this or that, there's some gravy, there's some goodies. And then there's the homework, extra homework for those that don't. So that's a couple of things that I think about.
That culture is critical because the IT department can talk all they want, but if the C-suite is not buying into it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Speaking of culture, I want to tie this in because when you talk about cybersecurity, it's tools, it's technology, but it's ultimately people. Yes. And I think Higginbotham, Stillwater Ecosystem, both people-driven, community-driven organizations. Talk about what that means in terms of a shared culture of taking care of people and community. And so, Stacey, start with you. What does that mean to work together?
Absolutely. So we have democratized or made it no cost best practices, thought leadership from across the ecosystem. We're drawing from 40 plus companies that if you were in the cybersecurity arena, you would know their names. We're drawing from expertise that's very deep and broad. Therefore, we're kind of crowdsourcing that expertise. Those are some things that just top of head come to mind.
Yeah. Dudley, what about you? What does it mean to be working together in a service-oriented organization?
So culture is huge at Higginbotham. We like to treat ourselves, or we like to think of ourselves as a business partner, just like they think of a lawyer or an accountant. We want to be that professional. We want to be their risk manager without getting paid for that side of it. And so it's huge. And that's one of the benefits to working with Stillwater is they understand that as well. They're not pushing anything. They're just trying to solve problems, but they're there if you need them.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with contact information and where everyone can go to learn more. So let's start, Stacey, on your end, Stillwater Ecosystem. Give us the website contact info.
Sure. Stillwater-ecosystem.com. And you certainly go to Higginbotham. You're going to get routed this way sometimes with that option too.
So Dudley, go ahead and wrap up on your end. Where do we go to learn more about Higginbotham?
Higginbotham.com. You'll find out everything you need to know.
Makes it easy. Well, Dudley, Stacey, thank you for all you guys do. You're amazing teams. Greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Our pleasure.